They descended the stair, Toad shouting abuse at them through the keyhole, and the three friends then met in conference on the situation. "It's going to be a tedious business," said the Badger, sighing. "I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him till the poison has worked itself out of his system." They arranged watches accordingly. Each animal took it in turns to sleep in Toad's room at night, and they divided the day up between them. At first, Toad was undoubtedly very trying to his careful guardians. When his violent seizures possessed him, he would arrange bedroom chairs in a rude resemblance of a motor car, and would crouch on the foremost of them, bent forward and staring fixedly ahead, making uncouth and ghastly noises till the climax was reached, when, turning a complete somersault, he would lie amidst the ruins of the chairs, apparently completely satisfied for the moment. As time passed, however, these painful seizures grew gradually less frequent, and his friends strove to divert his mind into fresh channels. But his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One fine morning, the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger, who he found fidgeting to be off and stretch his legs in a long ramble round his wood and down his earths and burrows. Toad, still in bed, said to the rat outside the door, "Can't get much out of him, except, 'Oh, leave him alone, he wants nothing. Perhaps he'll be better presently. It may pass off in time. Don't be unduly anxious,' and so on. Now you look out, rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulness. There's sure to be something up. I know him. Well, now I must be off." "How are you today, old chap?" inquired the rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. He had to wait some minutes for an answer. At last a feeble voice replied, "Thank you so much, dear Ratty. So good of you to inquire. But first tell me how you are yourself and the excellent Mole." "Oh, we're all right," replied the rat. "Mole," he added incautiously, "is going out for a run round with Badger. They'll be out till lunchtime, so you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump up, there's a good fellow, and don't lie moping there on a fine morning like this." "Dear, kind rat," murmured Toad, "how little you realise my condition, and how very far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and I do not expect to be one much longer. Indeed, I almost hope not." "Well, I hope not too," said the rat heartily. "You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning, it's too bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot." "I'm afraid it is the trouble you mind, though," replied the Toad languidly. "I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, I know." "You are indeed," said the rat, "but I tell you, I'd take any trouble on earth for you, if only you'd be a sensible animal." "If I thought that, Ratty," murmured Toad more feebly than ever, "then I would beg you, for the last time probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible. Even now it may be too late, and fetch the doctor. But don't you bother, it's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course." "Why, what do you want a doctor for?" inquired the rat, coming closer and examining him. He certainly lay very still and flat, and his voice was weaker and his manner much changed. "Surely you've noticed of late," murmured Toad. "But no, why should you? Noticing things is only a trouble. Tomorrow, indeed, you may be saying to yourself, "Oh, if only I'd noticed sooner, if only I had done something." But no, it's a trouble. Never mind. Forget that I asked. "Look here, old man," said the rat, beginning to get rather alarmed. "Of course I'll fetch a doctor to you if you really think you want him, but you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend," said the toad with a sad smile, "that talk can do little in a case like this, or doctors either, for that matter. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw. And, by the way, while you're about it, I hate to give you additional trouble, but I happen to remember that you'll pass the door. Would you mind at the same time asking the lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me, and there are moments, perhaps I should say, there is a moment when one must face disagreeable tasks at whatever cost to exhausted nature." "A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad," the frightened rat said to himself as he hurried from the room, not forgetting, however, to lock the door carefully behind him. Outside, he stopped to consider. The other two were far away, and he had no one to consult. "It's best to be on the safe side," he said on reflection. "I've known Toad fancying himself frightfully bad before, without the slightest reason, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. If there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old ass and cheer him up, and that will be something gained. I'd better humour him and go. It won't take very long." And he ran off to the village on his errand of mercy. The toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turn in the lock, watched him eagerly from the window till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible in the smartest suit he could lay hands on at the moment, filled his pockets with cash, which he took from a small drawer in the dressing table, and next, knotting the sheets from his bed together and tying one end of the improvised rope round the central mullion of the handsome Tudor window, which formed such a feature of his bedroom, he scrambled out, slid lightly to the ground, and taking the opposite direction to the rat, marched off light-heartedly, whistling a merry tune. It was a gloomy lunch for Rat when Badger and the Mole at length returned, and he had to face them at table with his pitiful and unconvincing story. The Badger's caustic, not to say brutal remarks may be imagined, and therefore passed over, but it was painful to the Rat that even Mole, though he took his friend's side as far as possible, could not help saying, "You've been a bit of a duffer this time, Ratty. Toad too, of all animals." "He did it awfully well," said the crestfallen Rat. "He did you awfully well," rejoined the Badger hotly. "However, talking won't mend matters. He's got clear away for the time, and that's certain, and the worst of it is, he'll be so conceited with what he'll think is his cleverness that he may commit any folly. One comfort is, we're free now, and needn't waste any more of our precious time doing sentry go. But we'd better continue to sleep at Toad Hall for a while longer. Toad may be brought back at any moment, on a stretcher or between two policemen." So spoke the Badger, not knowing what the future held in store before Toad would sit at ease again in his ancestral hall. Meanwhile, Toad, gay and irresponsible, was walking briskly along the high road some miles from home. At first he'd taken bypaths and crossed many fields and changed his course several times in case of pursuit. But now, feeling by this time safe from recapture and the sun smiling brightly on him, and all nature joining in a chorus of approval to the song of self-praise that his own heart was singing to him, he almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. "Smart piece of work that," he remarked to himself, chuckling. "Brain against brute force, and brain came out on top, as it's bound to do. Poor old Ratty. My, won't he catch it when Badger gets back? A worthy fellow, Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand some day and see if I can make something of him." Filled full of conceited thoughts such as these, he strode along, his head in the air, till he reached a little town with a sign of the Red Lion swinging across the road halfway down the main street reminded him that he had not breakfasted that day and that he was exceedingly hungry after his long walk. He marched into the inn, ordered the best lunch that could be provided at so short a notice, and sat down to eat in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when an only too familiar sound approaching down the street made him start and fall a-trembling all over. The poop drew nearer and nearer. The car could be heard to turn into the inn yard and come to a stop, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. Presently the party entered the coffee room, hungry, talkative and gay, voluble on their experience of the morning and the merits of the car that had brought them along so well. Toad listened eagerly, all ears for a time. At last he could stand it no longer. He slipped out of the room quietly, paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got outside, sauntered round quietly to the inn yard. "There cannot be any harm," he said in himself, "in my only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended, the stable helps and other hangers-on being all at their dinner. Toad walked slowly around it, inspecting, criticising, musing deeply. "I wonder," he said to himself presently, "I wonder if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, hardly knowing how it came about, he found he had hold of the handle and was turning it. As the familiar sound broke forth, the old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him, body and soul. As if in a dream, he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat. As if in a dream, he pulled the lever and swung the car round the yard and out through the archway. And as if in a dream, all sense of right and wrong, all fear and obvious consequences seemed temporarily suspended. He increased his pace, and as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country, he was only conscious that he was Toad once more, Toad at his best and highest, Toad the terror, the traffic queller, the lord of the lone trail, before whom all must give way or be smitten into nothingness and everlasting night. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with a sonorous drone. The miles were eaten up under him as he sped he knew not whither, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour reckless of what might come to him. "To my mind," observed the chairman of the bench of magistrates cheerfully, "the only difficulty that presents itself in this otherwise very clear case is how we can possibly make it sufficiently hot for the incorrigible rogue and hardened ruffian who we see cowering in the dock before us. Let me see. He is to be found guilty, on the clearest evidence, first, of stealing a valuable motor car, secondly, of driving to public danger, and thirdly, of gross impertinence to the rural police. Mr. Clark, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose on each of these offences, without, of course, giving the prisoner the benefit of any doubt, because there isn't any?" The clerk scratched his nose with his pen. "Some people would consider," he observed, "that stealing the motor car was the worst offence, and so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carries the severest penalty, and so it ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, which is mild, 3 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard from the witness box. Even if you only believe 1/10 part of what you heard, and I never believed more myself, those figures, if added together correctly, tot up to 19 years. First rate, said the chairman. So you had better make it around 20 years to be on the safe side, concluded the clerk. An excellent suggestion, said the chairman approvingly. Prisoner, pull yourself together and try and stand up straight. It's going to be 20 years for you this time, and mind, if you appear before us again, upon any charge whatever, we shall have to deal with you very seriously. Then the sergeant of police fell upon the hapless toad, loaded him with chains, and dragged him from the courthouse, shrieking, praying, protesting across the marketplace, where the playful populace, always as severe upon detected crime as they are sympathetic and helpful when one is merely wanted, assailed him with jeers, carrots, and popular catchwords. Past hooting schoolchildren, their innocent faces lit up with the pleasure they ever derive from the sight of a gentleman in difficulties. Across the hollow-sounding drawbridge, below the spitey portcullis, under the frowning archway of the grim old castle, whose ancient towers soared high overhead, past guardrooms full of grinning soldiers off duty, past sentries who coughed in a horrid sarcastic way, because that is as much as a sentry on his post dare to do to show his contempt and abhorrence of crime. Up time-worn winding stairs, past men-at-arms in armour, across the courtyards, and on, past the rack chamber and the thumbscrew room, past the turning that led to the private scaffold, till they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep. And there at last they paused, where an ancient jailer sat fingering a bunch of mighty keys. "Oh, Bodkin," said the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. "Watch and ward him with all thy skill," he said to the jailer. The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable toad. The rusty key creaked in the lock, the great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England. The end.